Steph Decker is back on single track. Last time, she shared the mic with her adventure partner Calvin and Freddie after their attempt to run R2R Alt. This time, she tells us of her epic, and I mean epic, summer project, the Olympic Loops by brainchild Christof Teuscher. Is an incredible 5-loop run covering some 320 some miles with almost 100,000 feet of vert. We talk about her inspiration, her scouting missions, and of course the gear she's thinking of bringing on her journey. Oh boy, projects like these leave me sort of speechless. Let's dive in. So last time we had you on this show, you came freshly off of a serious attempt of R2R Alt. But now you're back in the Olympic Peninsula, and following you on Instagram and Strava, there's not a single weekend where you're not coming up, not just with some kind of adventure, but a route that is sort of completely new and different. So I'm fascinated by that. We need to talk about this.
Yeah, so I've been doing a lot of scouting lately. There's a project that I've been working on that I was inspired by, I believe, and forgive me if I butcher his last name, but his first name is Christof, and his last name, I believe, is Teuscher.
Teuscher, yeah.
Teuscher, okay.
Mm-hmm.
So he created a series of loops in the Olympics. I don't know if you've been to his site before, but there's like a series of like 5 loops, and he calls them like the Olympic loops. And they traverse like so many parts of the Olympics. And I love the Olympics so much. And I thought, after doing the Grand Canyon, like that was a very humbling experience for me. I just kind of came home. I've had these loops on my mind for probably, I heard about them like last summer, and I started reading up on them. And I think one of the unique things about these loops is the different ranges that they traverse within the Olympics. So one of them is the Bailey Range, which is really complex. It has a lot of off-trail navigation. Mm-hmm. So I think that was what was pretty attractive to me about doing the rim-to-rim-to-rim alt route, is because it's not like a pretty straightforward trail. There's a lot of route finding, and I really like the complexity of that in trail running. Whether or not running is an aspect of that
sure.
actual thing when you're doing route finding. But I think part of it is being able to understand how we all like move through mountains. Mm-hmm. And I think there's lots of really different ways we can do that. I wouldn't call myself a very like speedy runner. I don't do like a lot of races. I love the community of the race environment. But I love races for that. And also, it helps with training, just kind of getting into that competitive space every once in a while, I think is really healthy. But where I truly feel like I thrive the most is just in these long adventure runs that may not have a clear path, and there's a lot of logistics involved with this one. So
let me interrupt you here. Yeah. There are a couple of things. No, because you're going super deep, and I love it, but we need to quickly backtrack a little bit.
Yeah,
so,
sure.
ChristofTeuscher.com, and we have the link in the show notes. He created what he calls the Olympic Loops, and it's 324 miles of pure wilderness bliss, according to him, and 92,000 feet of elevation gain. So, I mean, Christof is a different beast, right? I mean, I know of him and I follow him, but the stuff that he does is usually so beyond of like what I consider humanly possible that I sort of really only follow it on the periphery. I mean, I find it insane. So I'm curious, what attracts you to that? Because this is like truly, I mean, this is like beyond next level, right? I mean, the last thing he posted was he was doing like that Idaho trail and he had to stop doing it because a bear ate his food cache and stuff. Like, I mean, he does like, he's not just satisfied with a single Wonderland. He has to do like 7 Wonderlands or something like that, right? I mean, that's nuts.
I think, it is. I mean, but you know, that's like, I think where his passion lies. And I respect that.
No, obviously, right? Yeah. I mean, I totally respect it. But that brings me to you because, I mean, you know, I respect it for you too, of course. But I don't get to talk to people that have aspirations like that often. So I have to, you know, just like tell you that this is nuts.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. And that, you know, I've had to sit with that feeling, you know, several times looking at this. The one that so I took his route and I modified it just slightly, just because I think his route traverses the Bailey Range twice. If you look at how his loops pan out. And I didn't think that was, I didn't think that I needed to do that. So I still made them into loops, but I kind of rerouted it to work better for me. And I am very familiar with a lot of this terrain. That being said, there's still a few areas that that I'll still be scouting out. But, you know, I did the Grand Loop last summer. So that's very familiar to me. I spend a ton of time on the Dosey Wallops, you know, and I just was in the Grays Creek area last weekend, scouting out the Six Ridges part. You know, and I'm excited to explore other areas of the Olympics that, you know, I may want to, you know, learn more about. And I think, this is you know, a lot of distance covered. There's a lot of vert. I think he mentions that, you know, it's like you're Everesting 3 times from sea level. So the ultimate goal is to do this in one go at some point? Yeah, so the ultimate goal is to basically do this in the amount of time that is going to get us safely from point A to point B and so on and so forth until we get to the end. The intent is to stay on course the whole time. So, and I think that's kind of how the guidelines are written.
So you wouldn't like drive home or to a resupply cache or whatever, right? You would have to logistic everything that you could have somebody meet you at a trailhead and was resupplying. I mean, sure, then it wouldn't be self-supported or whatever, right? I mean, there are certain okay.
Yeah, and so I think the really amazing thing about Christof is he does a lot of these things self-supported or unsupported, and so I think that's a decision that I kind of made earlier on, that we were going to do this in a supported style, you know, because I think it, you know, given the terrain and given the distance, and given, you know, the desire to move efficiently and quickly, without, you know, risking, you know, potential injury or lots of different, unknown setbacks. I think that, you know, I think the supported style is going to work best for this situation. So,
you know, no, it's funny because we talked offline beforehand. We said we wanted to talk about hydration and running vests, and we really should have first talked about the vests, kind of the more boring and nerdy topic, and teased this insane thing towards the end, because that is really I mean, I have so many questions, partially because I'm obviously hugely fascinated by the idea of this, because here's why it is. Because I think most of our trails that we have as sort of maintained and supported by the National Park Service and WTA and stuff, they're focused on hiking trails. So I feel like the distances very often end up being in sort of this hiking distance mileage, right? And if you as a trail runner, you very quickly come to the limitations of what's possible. And so you either do these endless out and backs, or you have to come up with loops, and looping doesn't often exist without going off trail, right? I mean, that's where my Cushman 6 route comes in, where I try to come up with something. So I totally understand your brain, and I'm fascinated by it. But here is a challenge that I've run into, and I would love for you to hear by you of how you feel about this. And that is that, especially in the Olympics, the rock is crap.
Yeah.
And so you come so very quickly, right? So your ideals are, I would love to do X. And then you head out, and that's where your scouting trips comes in, I suppose. But you head out, and so very quickly you either have insane thick underbrush where bushwhacking cuts up your legs, challenges why you're wearing running clothes, and makes movement super slow. Or you get into terrain that is sketchy to navigate and dangerous. So how do you find yourself out there? What do you do?
I think I just it's
I mean, you agree with it. You agree with
yes,
it, right? I mean,
totally
that's sort of that interesting, right? You can
Yeah.
you can easily run up Mount Eleanor, and you can easily run up the obvious trails, but then I mean, just look at Washington and Eleanor next to each other, right? Eleanor is one of the most popular hikes in all of Washington, and then Mount Washington right next to it is an almost marked trail that is truly a climber's route, right?
Yeah, I think that's where our ability to assess risk comes into play. And so I think that's going to be a critical thing to keep in mind when doing a big effort like this. And that was something that I kind of kept in my back pocket going into the Rim to Rim Trim alt route. So you can't know everything about a route, especially if there's certain areas that may not be accessible until, August, or, just certain times of the year.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing about the Bailey is it's not something that you can come in from the center on, I don't think. It's definitely something you would have to explore from from different endpoints, like from the Soul Duck side, or from the Dodger Point side. And so that is just something, that you can take multiple days to go scout out, or you can kind of assess at what level or at what point you feel that you have an understanding of the terrain that you're dealing with, but accept the fact that there may be areas where that you'll encounter that you may have to turn around. And I always am willing to do that, just based off of my comfort level.
Yeah.
And I am grateful to, have a good group of people so far that I believe are willing to go and, support me out there, but also, realize that, if I need to stop, or if I have to bail, then I have to bail. And it may not even be the terrain. It may be injury. It may be, anything. Yeah. But I think that's just the big thing, is to not let ourselves get into this space of, I have to do this, I have to finish. I think that, and I've heard, from different there's some really wise words I've heard from some pretty experienced mountaineers. And, you know, it's always good to sit with a certain level of caution or fear kind of going into these things. I think if you didn't have that, I think you'd be asking for some pretty dangerous situations, because you're always just checking yourself.
Yeah. I've been super fascinated by this too, how mountaineers who put themselves into, to us as normal human beings, crazy dangerous terrain, how they're talking about their risk and their fear, and how they're saying that fear is what keeps you alive, essentially, right? That you don't go into this thinking that you are invincible. And I think that's a super important aspect in approaching these kind of situations. So let's backtrack a little bit more. So you found this project. This is so bonkers. Well, in a sense, because it's a big hairy goal, which is amazing, and you obviously don't put any time pressure on it, meaning you're scouting this out step by step, so you know what you can expect. So how did you get there? Where did you come from in terms of what is your happy place when you're running on a normal Saturday where you're not scouting, where you feel like, okay, this is not just a focused training run, this is not just a scouting run, this is sort of my route where I'm like, this is perfection?
Oh, wow. You have all these like really big, intense questions.
I don't know. They come out of this. Well, you started off. You could have started off with talking about running vests, and we would have had a very light, nerdy conversation. You immediately came up with this Olympic Loop project. You started this. I blame you.
I don't know. I think, you know, I started these past few months. I mean, I recently finished a scrambling course with the Mountaineers, and I had a lot of fun doing that. And I think my happy place is really just, gosh, like, I think climbing up into like a beautiful ridge. I think, you know, one of my favorite places that's super accessible is just going up the Tyler Peak Way Trail, and you're sitting in between, you know, these, you know, Baldy and Peak B and Tyler Peak, and you're just sitting in this saddle. And I went up there like last summer, just like I packed my pack with a little bit of dinner, and I took my dog, and we just sat up there and watched the sunset. And I just like, that was pure joy for me. You know, I wasn't trying to move fast or anything. It's just kind of, you know, it's exploring places and sitting in spaces that you feel so small. Mm-hmm. And I love that. And I think when I did the Grand Loop last summer and I hit Cameron Pass, I just, you know, I held this letter that my mom wrote me, like when I was in college, and I was about to go on a Knowles trip down to the Amazon, and you know, I just held that letter really close to me, and I think, you know, I looked around at the mountains and I looked around at ridges, and you know, it's just, I don't know, it's just you're alone. And one of my friends kind of jokes with me when we went up to Charlie Pass. He took a picture of me and he was like, you looked like you were communing with the wind, you know? And it's like, it sounds so corny, but like, honestly, it's just, that's kind of my happy place, is climbing up to high places and just being in the mountains. And, you know, maybe you're exploring a route in the mountains, or maybe you're just trying to get back on the trail and head back to the car. But I think just getting to high places is definitely my happy place.
I mean, I love this. I think it's interesting because you're expressing you're expressing a special experience that a lot of people romantically talk about, but especially as trail runners, we don't often take the time to appreciate. Like I'm in a training block right now. I did Mount Rose twice. I spent probably accumulated on the two summits less than 5 minutes on the top, right?
Yeah.
I was just like, I'm here to crush vert and get back home to the family. I'm not here for romance, but it is definitely something that stops you in your tracks. I think last year, even though the weather wasn't great and we were on a mission to a lot more, be finding yourself in that boulder field between Mount Washington and Mount Eleanor, it sort of stopped me in my tracks too. I was like, this is an absolute otherworldly place. And even though didn't take a lot of time to really take this in, it still is a memory that stays with you, right?
I think even if, you're going, you're doing these repeats on rows or, like whatever, like I did some hill repeats on the Dosi Wallows because that trail is deceivingly steep. It's just long. It's gradual. But, I think to an extent we all have a moment where we kind of, we take a pause, and, because we're out there for a reason, whether it's to train or whether it's to just be in nature or, check out some really beautiful views and skylines. But I think even if you pause, even if you're on a summit and you're pausing for a moment to just get back to the car, you're still pausing. And I think that there's something to be said about that, whether you're consciously aware of it or not. And it's why I feel like it's why we all get out on trails. There's a difference between running, sometimes all we have access to in the moment might be a road or a sidewalk, but when we can get out onto a trail, I think that there's something really special about that. And it kind of keeps us coming back to it, even if it's just a nice gradual little uphill up or on a Forest Service road, for example.
Absolutely. I mean, to find ourselves in a place where we have that luxury of being able to do something so seemingly pointless, is truly fantastic because it speaks to a richness that we have in our life, that we can afford us that I think gratitude is the only way we can really respond with that, right? And gratitude really about no matter what the trail is, no matter what the trip out is, it might not be successful. It might be something that was just checking off a box or something, right?
Yeah, and I think that kind of like ties back really well to these loops. It might not be successful. I might get out from the Solduck and get onto the Bailey and say this is way too much, and I might just definitely check my ego at the door. I do that every run, but I think that I might get up there and say this is too much and have to turn around and regroup. And I'm totally willing to be okay with that because these mountains I'm in their space, I'm not, and there's something to be said about respecting mountains and your ability to traverse them.
No, absolutely. I think that's the perfect approach. Now there is there's the emotional aspect of checking yourself when you go out on something like that, right? That I don't know, perhaps your ego or whatever, right? That you wanted to put this out and then you sort of pull back. But there's also the practical aspect, which is really challenging, which is, a project of that size, the amount of food caches or support that you would have to let's talk about the logistics of all of this, right? You're not just like training for this and scouting routes, which means lots of trips to new places. Last week, you went out and onto a scouting trip and you discovered that trails aren't actually as well defined as they might look on a map, right? And that's exactly one of those experiences that you have, right?
I believe, like the Six Ridges area, that trail. I mean, a lot of what we're trying to scope out is the primitive stuff, because, Gladys Divide, that the trail going up to Gladys Divide is, they label it, if you look at WTA, they label it as primitive, and it's very established. It's very easy to follow. But, then you get on to, you go down to Grays Creek and you immediately, like within, like, I want to say like 1,000 feet, there's a down tree that we have to clamber over. And then there's suddenly the trail becomes really overgrown and there's really not much running. And so that was kind of interesting, to take note of. It's also I've just been reading trip reports of people, having done these, certain sections and, where water might not be available. And just taking those things into consideration, I think that we're pretty lucky that the Olympics, the water sources in the Olympics are relatively good and abundant. But, we've been having some pretty dry years. And so, those are still things to keep in mind. Water levels in different areas where you can get access to water. I think the cool thing about this route, these loops, is there's a lot of really good access points and trailheads where you can meet up with crew.
Oh, that's great.
There are tons. Even we've talked about even having folks join us for certain sections where they, they might want to run a section and, run some support stuff in and then, run back out with us, kind of like a key exchange.
Perfect.
But so there's a lot of trailheads to meet people at, where we can, we can regroup, we can resupply, we can sleep, which we will definitely be doing. We might be taking some dirt naps, but I anticipate some, a few hours of sleeping here and there at each trailhead.
Yeah, 300 miles you definitely will need. You need more than just pushing until you fall over, right? You need some dedicated downtime, right?
Yeah.
So this project is like, I don't know what dimension bigger than my Cushman 6 route. Do you keep a written journal where you take notes of all of these sections of trails and things you find and things you need to consider? Do you just keep it all in your brain? How do you organize all of this lead up to this?
I try not to make it too complicated. I think it does help that I am familiar with parts of these loops, and the areas that I am not, that I have not spent a ton of time in, just taking note of things, there's, I think, last couple weekends ago when we were on Six Ridges, someone marked a waypoint on the map and just, put a note there that, I think there was a part of the trail that we wanted to go to Sundown Lake, and we ended up going in the total wrong direction. And because there was a down tree that had a directional sign that basically just was so confusing. And so we just went the wrong direction. So we just, took note of that because, the Park Service, it may take some time for them to get out there to fix these things. And so writing things down is helpful. I think, making, marking waypoints on trails is another thing I've done. I recently just had like a couple support meetings with crew, and so putting a Google Doc together, just a shared document that people can collaborate with and look at and see, where we need to make adjustments or where people are going to be, and figuring out. I think the hardest part right now is just figuring out what time we'll be getting to these different checkpoints and how long that's going to take us in between checkpoints. And so I think you kind of just have to determine a window. and what that window will be for you. And so, and how long you want to take to actually do these loops. And so I think for us, we're thinking about, 5 to 6 days. So each loop will take roughly a day, and then we have an extra day just as kind of, as buffer. Okay. And so, cause some of these, and also dividing it up, not by loops, but by sections. So section A to B, where you start, from Solduck, and then you get to Hurricane Ridge, that's one section. And then from North Fort Quinault up to Deer Park, that's another section. And so helping to break it up like that, because that'll determine where your support team is going to be, if that makes any sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. I mean, I think it's obviously a little bit tricky for our listeners because they don't have the map. I mean, this is literally like a conversation that we should be having with a beer or a glass of wine over a dinner table with the maps out, and we can actually Sharpie all of that stuff in, because that would sort of give you that visual overview, right? So when you're out there, what GPS tool do you use to mark things? You use Gaia, or what do you use from a navigational piece?
I've been using, so far I've been using a lot of CalTopo. Okay. And I find that, and then Christof has everything on Gaia. And I've been kind of going back and forth. I think CalTopo tends to have, I feel that it tends to have a little bit more data. And you can get in like it's a little more granular as far as what kind of details you can pull, and as far as the map creation goes. And then it's really helpful to just, copy and paste the link and send it to folks to look at. So I've been doing it that way. I think also just for safety and ease of logistics, using an inReach is what we plan to do. Mm-hmm. Being able to communicate that way is going to be helpful. Someone had mentioned something to me about, putting in your, actually typing in the time you're sending the message, because when someone receives a message through an inReach might not be, it might, your message might go out 20, 30 minutes after you press send. And so just saying like, hey, I'm sending this at, 6:30 p.m. And then they might not get it until 7 o'clock.
Yeah. That's a really good tip. Absolutely. That's great.
So these little things just kind of make the logistics a little bit better. And, part of it is also just collaboration with people. Mm-hmm. I've heard a lot of really great ideas from my friends, and, just things to consider, and just to make the whole experience just a little bit easier, relatively speaking. So clearly this project is already a lot further in the development phases than perhaps I expected. I don't know. I assumed when you first started off talking, it was one of those like so crazy out there goals. Once in my life it would be great. But you're clearly very much in the weeds. Do you have a tentative plan of when you want to attempt this? Is there a date already set for this? Yes. Oh my goodness. I don't know if I should. I don't know.
Well, it's fine if you don't want to say it. No, I totally get this, because plans change, and things come up. But just knowing the fact that you are already seriously considering this, because I think we all have these adventure goals, if you will, which is very different. And we've talked about this on this podcast many times before. So it's so easy to set yourself a hairy goal by signing up for a race, as long as, you don't have any requirements to fulfill. But it's reasonably easy to say, okay, 6 months from now, I'm going to do this race. I've never done this distance before. And you sign up, and well, then you're going to do it because you paid the money and the date is in the calendar. If you have your own adventures, you have sort of this list of things that you want to do in your life. And I mean, I've joked for years that I want to, well, I joked. It had become a joke until I finally ran the enchantments. But that was one of those things that I want to do it. And it wasn't that I was afraid of Asgard Pass. It was more that the logistics of driving over to Leavenworth and trying to figure this all out, right? I mean, but many of these adventures require the logistics just as much as the physical ability to run the miles, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, this is crazy. This is positively great. No, I love it. I absolutely love it. I say it's crazy, and because we obviously have listeners who are not familiar with the Olympics, and I repeat what I said earlier again. The Olympics are a different beast. I mean, I think you can go to the Alps and you can get yourself into very serious mountainous terrain too, but I don't know if there's a single wall in the Alps that hasn't been climbed. It's, every mountain somebody has stood on. There are miles of trails, and of course you can still come up with awesome projects by connecting routes. But in the Olympics, nobody has ever done. Has Christof done this Olympic loop, or did he just map it out and put it on his website?
So I chatted with him. I had a few message exchanges with him on Instagram, and to my knowledge, he hasn't done this yet. And so I don't, and because I had to reroute things so that it, works for me, I don't know if it'll still qualify, but, because it's not one for one the loops that he has noted here, on his website, but, I think this is what, works for me. And I'm still super jazzed and excited to attempt it. And it's definitely going to be a challenge that I hope to see through to the end. I think we tentatively have plans to start it around the last week of August.
Okay.
So around the 30th is when, we're hoping to start things.
Hopefully you won't have to deal with smoke.
Yes,
right?
Exactly,
And which is like one of those crazy new considerations that we have to wonder and worry and plan around, right?
Yeah, and that's another risk to that we've noted, and how we're going to respond if smoke ends up becoming an issue before we start. And then, but more importantly, what happens if we're out there and then, and a fire starts out in the Olympics, hopefully it doesn't, but, just figuring out where we can, that's why it's important to have, some safety precautions in place, like an in-reach, and being able to have support. Crew support is also a huge plus. So, I think there's a lot of variables involved, and those are things that we're just going to have to be flexible with. So.
I mean, I love your hunger for something so insanely audacious. No, I'm serious, because I mean, every single one of these loops by itself would be an incredible achievement, and would put you into a place where very, very few people have ever done something like that.
Yeah, and someone did actually mention that to me the other day. Just to do one or two, and if something happens where we don't finish, then that alone is a huge accomplishment. So yeah, totally agree with you on that.
Yeah, it's amazing, because I think I approach my projects a little bit different, probably because I'm way more of a chicken in mountainous terrain. I'm serious. I mean, when we did Cushman 6, I feel like I've I've not done any specific training, mountaineering training in that regard, but I feel like I've sort of reached, that's been sort of my comfort level with what I want to do. And we were able to do it because Chris, who was with us, was incredibly good at navigating. And if you have somebody who can find a route and confidently say, this is the route that we need to go, right? Then you're not second guessing yourself, because feel like when you're in mountainous climbing terrain and you don't 100% know if the route that you're taking is the right one, that adds a layer of discomfort that goes beyond just, oh, now I have to use my hands, and oh yeah, the rock is not that great, right? Not knowing if you're actually in the right place is it sort of, I don't know, puts me into a weird place. And I think what made Cushman possible was that we had Chris with us, who was such an incredible navigator and sort of was always 50 feet ahead of us, which really helped a lot, right?
Yeah, I think and I should have mentioned at the beginning that my running partner, Calvin, who did the rim to rim to rim all with us, he's going to be accompanying me on this big venture, and he's done a lot of he's done some summits up Rainier. He has some mountaineering experience, and he's a pretty amazing trail runner. And so I'm looking forward to having someone like him do this with me, and just having another person, I think, is also really good for safety. But someone who is, familiar with like risk management and, navigating off trail, and kind of, those different checkpoints, and things to keep in mind, just to make sure the experience is safe, and always, and having a plan B is huge too. I think I mentioned that last time we chatted.
Yeah.
So
I know it sounds incredible. I think for me, the other aspect that with the kind of routes that I'm looking for, that it's not just the fear factor. It's also, for me, I like the idea of coming up with something that can be repeatable. Where
exactly.
What you're doing is sort of, no one's ever going to repeat that, right?
I mean, Christof might do it.
No, sure. I mean, if you're putting it out, if you're putting this down, then he's going to come out. But I mean, when I say nobody, then I basically exclude him, because I think what he does is just so out of this world.
It's definitely impressive, the things that he does. But he also, it's reading his recent post about how a bear got into a completely sealed container that he had buried into the ground with all of his supplies. Like, that's crazy. I mean, it's something that, is you'd have to consider. And, he could have kept going. It seemed like he was relatively healthy to keep going, but just this one thing stopped him. And so it's just kind of like, you kind of feel that weight, and you're like, oh man. And so, it just kind of goes back to the different support styles that, work for people. And I think that's the thing to keep in mind with FKTs. I think the FKT site, doesn't say one support style is better than the other. It's just, it's what works for you and what works for the route. And I think there are some routes that are best done supported, and some routes that are best, that may not be best done unsupported, but can be done unsupported or self-supported.
You're making a very good point, right? That I don't think there's any qualitative judgment of if an attempt is better done one way or the other, because in many ways there are so many variables. It's not just about your personal ability to carry more gear on your back, or there are all these logistics of, if you would have to stash all this food, you're driving for days at a time into these remote areas. There is sort of a luxury again, right? That goes way beyond physical abilities when you're operating on this scale that is more akin to a Himalayan expedition where you are planning your gear and you're figuring exactly out how much food you need for a specific stretch and how much needs to get packed into one place and the other, right? And if you do it all yourself, then that requires weeks and weeks of planning, which means you have to have all this time to do this, which some people don't. And the alternative is that what we see at races like Western States, where the top runners have like a team of 10 people who have all this time to do nothing but carry you to the finish line, right? And I mean, I'm not saying that flippant, but it is sort of something where it's like, I don't have that many people to call upon to sort of help me along, right? So you then have to be a little bit more self-sufficient, right? Or you have to figure out what route can I do that I can be home by dinner or so, right? I think that's the beauty of these trail adventures that are not fixed races where we're just comparing who's the fastest on this specific route, but we can figure out what works for us as an adventure from not just our physical abilities. It's everything combined, right? How much time do we have? Speaking of which, are you going to be taking your dog? You can't take your dog on a trip like that.
No, my dog will be hanging out with some of his other furry buddies. So
I'm not a pet owner. I see you and others go out with dogs onto these trips, and clearly these dogs are independent enough that you can trust them, and they're not a liability, but to me they seem like a liability. Just speak to that. No, I mean, I'm not I'm just being a complete ignorant idiot when it comes to that. No, to enlighten me. How much does it give you peace in that you in bear country have support with you in that sense, that you're not alone, and how much is another creature liability? That creature needs to drink water too and needs to eat too. Speak to that.
So Topo, I'll just say that Topo loves snow probably a little bit more than dirt and trails, but he loves being outside. He can go a little bit further in cooler temperatures. He's a golden retriever, so he doesn't, he's not built to run super far. So there's been a couple instances where I have had to scramble to find water, because I'll bring like 2 flasks with me of water and then 2 flasks on me. So I'll have 4 with me total. And, like trails like Mount Jupiter, going up to Mount Jupiter, that was, I think, a couple weekends ago, that whole trail just doesn't really have any water sources on it. And it is exposed. And so when you get up to the top, I get to a point where I feel that, okay, it's time to turn around. And so we'll turn around, even if I think we were probably like 1,000 feet from the summit. We weren't really that far from the summit, but he had enough. And so we headed back down, and we made it back to the car. But I think Topo is, he really likes to run around, and he goes up the trail and down the trail, and then he'll run alongside me. We'll start jiving together when I'm like running. But I think he's, for the most part, I think he kind of just likes to be outside. He doesn't matter what we're doing. And so I feel safe bringing him with me. I like having him with me. There's been a couple times, I think, I mentioned before, I went up to Peak B, and just kind of sat there and had dinner. And there were a couple times where, he kind of went on, alert, and sensed something. And then, we headed down the trail, and I was like, okay, we're just going to go back to the car now. And a friend of mine had mentioned like the next day that, they saw some paw prints that didn't look like doggy paw prints. It kind of looked like, wider, flatter, more like some big cat paw prints. So probably what he sensed was something that, I wasn't wholly aware of, but we made the decision to go back to the car. So those are times where I'm really thankful that he's with me. I'm thankful he's with me all the time, but there are times where I have to, and as he gets older, I have to make those decisions of like, okay, well, he's going to hang out with my cousin up in Paulsbo, and his dog sitter, just a couple minutes away, rather than go on these long trail runs with me. So
that's great. That's great.
Yeah.
It's great that you have somebody that you can take out with you. I'm not a big fan of completely going solo. Not because, perhaps because I'm just a chicken, but I don't like being in my head for too long. Like, that's why I enjoy doing Mount Rose. I mean, I ran into tons of people and we chatted, and it was fun. I enjoyed that aspect, even though it killed my time having to talk to people, but I would have been so much faster.
We're all like coming out of COVID, and we're just like, people.
Yeah, exactly.
Talking to people.
Exactly.
But yeah, no, he's great. I feel the same way sometimes, if I haven't run alone for a while and then I start running alone, it takes a little bit of time to get used to like, oh, I'm by myself and I'm in my head, and what else is out here, and as the days grow shorter, you're kind of thinking to yourself, okay, how comfortable do I feel running in the dark for this long, or, just thinking about those variables. But
it's true, especially now in the summer times where we have these long daylight hours. Usually by the time it's like March, so be comfortable with it, because we had to run in the winter all the time. We're used to the headlamp, or we even navigating without headlamp if we're not very far on trail or so. But yeah, it's true, and we sort of unlearn that, and we're so comfortable with having this other person bounce off anything, really, right? Just from entertainment point of view, from a safety, being able to make decisions of route finding or whatever. It's very different than if you're by yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And being in, like having a dog kind of limits sometimes where I can go in the Olympics, just because I can't bring him into the park with me. So
right.
if there's a trail that I know he could do, and if it's in the park, then I automatically know, well, he can't go with me. And that's okay. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, no, I know, absolutely. I mean, that's good. So, I mean, going back to this absolutely insane project, how much of do you hope by August you've been able to have done all the stretches individually, or how much do you think you're going to be encountering new?
So, like I said, like, you can't like know every part of whatever. I mean, and even if like I had done, I did the Grand Loop, last summer. And part of, there could be a massive down tree somewhere along Grey Wolf. There could be a lot of things that changed between, last summer and this summer. But having a little bit of that general knowledge of the trail, I think is really helpful, especially if you have to navigate anywhere off trail. Mm-hmm. But, I think, I hope to have most of these loops, not all the sections, but I hope to have chunks of them scouted out by the time we head out. And so, like, for example, this coming week, I'm taking an entire week off from work to go scout the Bailey and then run and explore the Six Ridges, the Skyline Trail area. That's an area that I wanted to explore more last summer, but I chose the Grand Loop instead. So I think that should be interesting. And I'm really looking forward to it. So
amazing. Well, I'm glad you've got the LBA race on your agenda and horizon, because nothing prepares you better for a project like that than running 5 loops through a city park.
It's getting me ready for loops.
Yeah, exactly. Loops, just the same thing.
Yeah, but I mean, it goes back to what I said, before, where it's just, I'm excited to connect. We've actually never met in person, and so I'm excited to connect with people that, again, in person, or, just the running community, and, meeting you, and I'm really looking forward to it. So
that's awesome.
I think that's exciting.
After this call, I have to go back out and make the route a lot harder. I have to come up with some kind of down trees or something. Figure something out.
Just go take an axe or something and couple
I know. No, how about not? So let's talk about what people have been waiting for the entire thing. Let's talk about gear, because apparently that's the most exciting thing. I personally only want to talk about La Sportiva shoes, and we can touch on this a little bit, but you were mentioning prior that that you're working on coming up with the perfect pack. Tell me about where you're at with this, and then I'll respond.
Yeah, so I think originally when we were thinking about doing this, we thought, we're going to need like a 15, 20 liter pack, because I mean, we are still approaching this kind of more as like a fast pack style, fast packing, speed hiking, trail running, all those things. But just doing either one of those 3 things, on the trail that, fits the situation the best. And so because we're taking multiple days to do this, we thought, we're going to need more of like a hiking pack, not like a backpacking pack, but more of like a day pack or something that is used in fast packing, basically. And so, I looked at a couple, I think for the alt route, I wore the UD Fast Packer 30, I believe it was, and I just felt that I thought that pack was great as far as, durability. The back pocket, the back stash pocket was perfect for my fins. I did feel that the front pockets were a little too specialized.
Okay.
And the biggest thing that I noted, which I haven't seen a lot of, is just kind of the security of how the fit of the pack on my body. Like, I'm a super petite person. I just have a small frame, and a small body, and I'm short. And so my torso is kind of like, I find that packs, I have to really, like, even extra small, sometimes I just really have to cinch it down, and it ends up feeling like I have all these straps kind of like flying about. And so that was one of the things I noted with that pack, and just the waist belt, I thought could have been, a little bit more substantial, just to kind of have that more secure fit around the hip.
Especially with 30 liters, right?
Yeah, I know. And so if you're, and the thing that I realize is, just because it says 30 liters doesn't necessarily mean you fill it up to 30 liters. Like, it's probably going to fit better and move with you better if it's like, 20 to 23 or something.
Okay.
So, And that's what I've realized in these packs. But, you know, I've been scoping things out. I think there's some Osprey packs that look like they have a more secure fit. You know, that's great for fast packing. I think Kelly Halpin did her Wind River High Route with the Tempest Pro, which I've been curious to see how that fits. But I've also been looking at some Salomon vests too. I really love how those like just are so, they're so, they just like mold to your body. However, and I love the elastic band on the front.
Oh, that's interesting. I'm not the biggest fan of the elastic band.
Oh, you aren't?
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I just feel like there are too many variables. Like, I appreciate the Nathan vest that just has that just clips, right? And you sort of have, you can slide it up and down on the left and right side where it attaches. But then once you sort of have your sizing, it just clips and it fits. And I feel like with that, I've only used it Solomon a couple times, but these elastic bands, I feel like they feel too fussy for me.
I think just like Solomon does this thing where it's like, I think they have like this, it's like kind of reminds me of their like speed lacing system on their shoes. You know, you just like cinch it down and then like, that's it. You know, and then you're ready to go. And I guess for me, just cause I'm, you know, I have a small frame, and I find that their unisex, their unisex packs, like sizing still fits me.
That's great.
And so, yeah.
But you're struggling with trying to figure out if the quiver fits on it, right? This pole thing is a huge thing. I'm a huge pole user, but I do admit there are times, especially when you're sort of going nonstop, when you wish the reverse, where sometimes people use poles as a relief from running without them. And I use the poles so much that I wouldn't mind being able to stash the poles away for a while. And outside from like completely taking my pack off and putting them in the back, I haven't found a good solution for that. And Solomon does have that quiver, and it works, but I haven't used it myself. So I just know.
You should try it. It's amazing. I didn't think I was going to like it because I can't stand jostling. And so when I hear things jostling on my body, I have to like figure out a way to like just cut the noise out or something. But I do hear a little bit of jostling with the quiver, but like not enough for me to be annoyed by it. And I actually have I've fallen in love with the quiver. Like I love this thing. It makes me feel like the Xena warrior princess. Like I just
nice. No, it's great. It's great because I've been debating if I should. Well, I've been debating for my race in September if I should do a quiver or if I should do a hip band with an attachment that lets you put your poles horizontally on your hip. But then you have
like behind you?
In the front. Like I just saw like Ultimate Direction, they have a hip band that could give you additional storage on top of it. But you essentially can put right where your hip band is, like left and right, so not vertically, horizontally. You fit your poles. I just saw Jeff Browning finish Hard Rock that way. Like, I don't know what... I think he's an Ultraspired sponsored athlete, so he might have the Ultraspire belt. But Ultimate Direction has a belt too. Where you just have elastic bands where you can shove the poles in. And apparently it works okay. Now, that could go either ways. It could either be a positive thing, meaning you could run with a smaller pack and have additional storage solutions on the belt, because the belt offers more like pockets to stash stuff beyond just holding your poles. But that's the positive. On the other side, you then have to wear two different things, right? You wear a belt, a waistband, and the pack, right? And so you gotta figure out if that makes sense. But so that's the thing that I'm debating. I currently have two packs that I'm sort of testing, and one of them is the Solomon XA15 that you were talking about, which a friend of mine gave me, but has so many straps that I haven't figured out how to properly like tighten it down. And the other one is that Nathan Pinnacle vest that is 12 liters only. So I mean, it definitely wouldn't be big enough for you. But that one doesn't have a good way of putting the poles, attaching the poles.
I actually saw a guy running up, just like speed hiking up Buckhorn. And he had the XA15, and I thought, I don't know if he just had like the 25 on or the 15, but I thought that it looked fairly like big. And I don't know.
It's definitely more of a pack than those Solomon Advanced Skins, right? Or even that Nathan Pinnacle. Like, those are more skin vests that really hug you. Wherein they feel like a piece of clothing with pockets, wherein that XA15 or whatever is more of a backpack. Which I think can be tightened down really well. Like, I've worn it now twice, and it was fine from a bounciness. I think it holds well, but it felt like a lot of material. And so, like, I felt like I was sweating quite a bit wearing it because it felt like it was more material than like my Nathan vest, which feels more, like an extended shirt, essentially.
Yeah, and I don't know if you've tried. So Solomon has their Pro line,
which S-Lab.
Well, I don't know if it's the S-Lab or if they're. I think it's actually. I don't think it's the S-Lab. I think that there are. It's like the material is lighter, so it's like there's the advanced skin, and then there's these. There's basically like the Sense Pro.
Okay.
And so the same like volume of pack, like the Advanced Skin 8 and the Sense Pro, 10. Like, I have the 5, my Advanced Skin 5 yellow vest, which is like literally my favorite running vest. But then I have the Sense Pro 10 that I just picked up. And the Sense Pro 10 is actually lighter, feels lighter. When it's emptied, it's like feels lighter than the Advanced Skin 5 because I think the material is lighter. It breathes better. I think it's that they have a women's specific line that it fits me really well.
Nice. I'm looking at it right now. We'll have links to everything in the show notes for people who might be driving right now and probably shouldn't open their phone and look at this. Nice.
And I think the feedback, the only feedback I have is just I want to see brighter colors. Like, I love these, like the yellow and the blues and the reds, and I think some of these like blacks and dark blues. I don't know. No,
I 100% hear you. It's very boring. So, but I mean, for your big project, you couldn't just go with a 10 liter.
No, I think, and that's why, it's kind of nice that we've decided to do this. The support style we've chosen is a supported effort. So it will allow us to pack a little bit lighter.
Okay, great.
Knowing that, we might be able to have people running with us or running in to meet us or just simply meeting us at a trailhead, it will allow us to pack a little bit lighter, which will be really nice. So I'm kind of, I think I even heard a friend at one of our planning meetings who who provided support to another friend at Cocodone, he mentioned that some people even had the Advanced Skin 12s that they were running with, and for 250 miles. So I think that it just depends, how much we're going to need to carry. I think it may, I may have different packs for different sections. So I might have the 12 for, certain, like the Grand Loop. I think there's, I might not want to run with a 12 for 65 miles through 26,000 feet of gain. I might want to do something that I'll be able to pack more nutrition, and it also, the terrain will determine what I pack. So I might need to pack a puffy, like a puffy jacket. And so that might not fit very well in a 12. But just kind of keeping those things in mind. So I might bring a larger pack, for some sections and a smaller pack for others. So.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. If you have the ability to switch around, then it works. I mean, that's one of the big challenges between the difference between an adventure run where you organize everything yourself versus a race. Like when I attempted Zion, it's 100 miles, but with 8 stations every 5 to 10 miles, it's reasonably easy to not have to carry anything. There was no required gear. You were sitting in the desert or running in the desert. And so you don't really need to take anything on your back other than make sure you have enough water and any nutrition that you don't want to take at the aid station. And that's literally all you need to worry about. If you go on these adventure runs, everything from an in-reach to safety, emergency blanket, and some of those basics, they fill up your pack if you like it or not. And sort of, and that's stuff that might not be anything on your required list. Like the race that I'm training for is in Europe, and they have very specific requirements of what you should be, what you have to have with you. And so I'm trying to figure out, what the right pack for that scenario is, right? Because, I have to carry it. They 100% do a bag check, and there's no, I won't need that, right?
Yeah, the adventure runs are definitely like something that you want to definitely find the right pack for. But and then I've been looking at these Osprey packs too. So I think it's also like something to think about. It's just like getting maybe you've done this with shoes before, but and I've done it, but where you buy 3 or 4 different packs and you take them all out for a training run or something like that and just see how they feel. I find that that's really helpful, and then kind of bring back the ones that may not make that, may not work as well.
Absolutely. I try to be very conscientious of that because I feel bad taking something back after 3 miles of usage. So I'm trying. No, I mean, for something that's important, especially with shoes, it's a different story. But with other stuff, I try to be reasonable about it. But I've definitely done it with shoes. I've ordered 4 pairs of shoes and had a whole shoe store. In fact, I've actually invited friends to come over to into the garage to try out the shoes that I had temporarily at home. And and those ones you can't run very far because those ones I return again, but you're welcome to try them on. So I've definitely done it. But now that you've mentioned shoes, we have to talk about La Sportiva. You are one of the few people I know who wears a lot of La Sportiva shoes, which is amazing.
Yeah, I used to wear a much different shoe, a very different shoe, and then I started having these weird sesamoid issues in my feet. And I think what was happening was my arch was starting to collapse a little bit. And so I had been wearing these same shoes for a couple of years, maybe a few years since I had come back from an injury, a running injury, and I just needed a little bit more cushion. And so I just, thought I'd try something just different. And I wanted something that provided really good stability and really good traction. And that was lightweight, and a relatively like medium, heel toe drop. And so I thought that, I would just give La Sportiva a try. And I tried the first shoe I ever tried was their Mutant.
Great start.
Gosh.
Great start.
Oh man. That shoe, like, I just felt like my whole, like, I have really narrow feet. And so finding a shoe that I don't have to like constantly stop and like tie down and like, re-cinch the laces and everything, like not having to do that in this shoe and being able to have a really lightweight shoe that was really good stability, really good traction, really grippy on rock. It's an amazing climbing shoe. Not climbing like rock climbing, but like climbing.
No, absolutely. I think the rubber on, because La Sportiva, and I just mentioned in last week's episode, that because La Sportiva has so much experience in the climbing world, both on a serious Himalayan expedition climbing, but also in rock climbing. I think when it comes to their rubbers, they're unmatched. I think they make the absolute best shoes for mountainous terrain. Yeah,
and I think that shoe, it's so interesting because that's such a unique shoe. Most of the shoes that they get a lot of really good feedback on are like the Bushido, which is a really common one I think that we see out there. I've tried that shoe and I love that shoe as well. I think sometimes I feel that the traction isn't as good as some of the ones with like the bigger lugs. Like I think the Lycans, they have really good lugs as well. Mm-hmm. So and they grip really well.
If you want big lugs, you need to try out the Cyclones. I have this pair at home and it's insane.
I heard it like the last episode of your show. I heard you just raving about that shoe. I'm excited to try it.
But both of the shoes, I hope they work for you, because I feel like if you say you have narrow feet, I feel like they are a little bit wider because people for years have been screaming for a wider toe box. And so they are getting a little bit wider, especially compared to the Bushido. But they, both of those shoes are absolutely amazing. And the Cyclones are great because of that neoprene sock around it. It just, around your ankle, it just gives you so much different support in an area where you usually don't have support, which is great, and especially for this mountainous terrain. John Kelly, who is that crazy American who won the Barkley and then moved to England, and since then spends like every few weeks going after one of those insane Bob Graham rounds and stuff, records. He just started going off a route where I think he's doing like 300 peaks or something like that, right? And some of them are hills, but they're runnable hills. Is kind of fell running in England. But he started off running in the Cyclones, and I was like, whoa. I mean, if he does the entire route in Cyclones, then I would be really impressed, because I don't know if those shoes are going to be lasting. They are great for a super long distance. I felt like they didn't have quite as much underfoot support, but
yeah, I think that was the thing that I was a little bit weary about with that shoe, is the underfoot support. just because of the distances. But, it's still worth giving it a try for sure.
Yeah. Oh, amazing. Well, cool. I've been pushing you very long in this episode, and I appreciate your time. Well, I mean, really, I'm blaming you because you roll out.
I could keep talking about routes and shoes and packs.
I know. I'll have you back because if this adventure is something that requires more than one episode, I thought you'd become with something more reasonable. That's something that I can wrap my head around. But that is that route, that adventure that you're planning is something that I need to now go back and study. It's interesting because it got me sort of excited because this year is a weird year for me where I sort of indirectly, spontaneously got signed up to all these races. And so my focus this year is really on just trying to complete these races. And obviously, going to Europe and visiting family and stuff takes a lot of time away from actually being here. And so I just didn't even plan anything for this year other than just obviously training and focusing on Monte Rosa. And therefore, I don't really have anything planned. I mean, Cushman 6 was for me something that I, in theory, had dreamed about for years. That wasn't something that I just had spontaneously come up with. And so now this is completed. And as I said, Enchantments was on sort of a list of having to finally do, and then I'm complete. So I'm sort of empty, right? I sort of don't really have, I've never run around Mount St. Helens. I've never run around Mount Hood. I mean, there are definitely routes that I'd be super excited about doing, but something that is in that spirit of doing something that nobody has ever done before, or something completely new or different. Yeah. I haven't really spent any time, and so your crazy attempt is inspiring because it makes me think of okay, but what is next for me? So it's super cool.
Yeah, I think that, like I said kind of towards the beginning, I don't, run a whole ton of races, and I wouldn't consider myself a very fast runner, but, I love doing things that maybe, are firsts, maybe something that someone else hasn't tried yet, because it still challenges me in a way that is that I think similar to, how races challenge other people. I think and it's personal too. Sometimes you see the Olympics are a very beautiful space for me. I challenge myself sometimes to go to other ranges and other mountain peaks and explore those. But I think this is definitely something I'm looking forward to. And, just when I did the Constance Pass Loop, that was something that I created kind of on a whim. Mm-hmm. And that, those trails are trails that I, had spent a lot of time on. And doing that loop was something really special for me because I, was coming out of an injury. I was ready to kind of take the next step and see how far I could go, from, doing tons of strength training, and just coming from that space of recovery. And so I wanted to see what I was, and that was the furthest I had run. And so I was really proud of that. And so that was a really special moment. And I think that's kind of the space I always come back to when I think about these things is, it's not totally impossible. It feels scary at first, but, it's just, sometimes it's it can be complicated, having to, do a ton of route finding when you're tired and all you want to do is just stop. But it can also be as simple as breaking it down and, telling yourself to put one foot in front of the other.
Yeah.
So I think I'll be in both those spaces plenty of times when I'm out there. So.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to put a button into this conversation here, and we'll pick it up in a few weeks because you're doing some serious ramping up, and I've got lots more questions about planning, logistics, who is all on your team, how are they going to be supporting you. So I've got a whole list that is in my head swirling around, but I don't want to keep you for another 4 hours, which I'm afraid it would take that long. This is absolutely amazing. Steph, thank you so much for joining me here on Single Track. And well, we see each other in a couple of weeks, so I'm super excited that you come down to Olympia to run Little Backyard Adventure. Before we go, tell people where they can connect with you if you want them to. Perhaps you don't know. If you Instagram, Strava, wherever you are.
Yeah, I'm on Instagram primarily. I like to post a lot of really pretty pictures and talk about the places that I've been to and give some good trip reports. I am on Strava. I'm just under Steph Decker. I think my description just says like Olympic Mountains, van, dog, and snacks. So
Fantastic.
That's kind of my
life. Amazing. Do you want to give your Instagram for your dog too?
Oh yeah. So my Instagram for my dog is Topo and the Turtle Rocket. So I have a green Vanagon. So if anyone's ever out on the peninsula and they see a green van, 1985 Vanagon driving around, maybe sometimes with a golden retriever in the back, that's us.
Fantastic. That's amazing, Steph. Your adventures are inspiring. Thank you again. And we'll talk very soon.